Good morning, ladies and germs. This is your Carolina primary and coronavirus update for the 29th. Hey, we every 4 years. And how do you know it's a fourth year? Well, if there's an election for president, then it is a year in which February has 29 days. I guess if you're going to be queer, you may as well all be all the way queer. Oh, wait, I used the Q word. That makes me I don't know what it is. Let's see, homophobe? I suppose I'd be a homophobe. Well, I've been called a racist. So yeah. I am a racist. I admit to this. I think white man sanitation good is a fantastically positive thing, and I guess that makes me a racist because that means I have a preference. Yes, I have a preference. I like the idea of the fact that white men invented flush toilets and sewage systems. And I'll get into that in a minute because it's coronavirus time. But first, it's politics time. Today is the day that we get the find out of whether or not Joe Biden actually has any momentum left and whether he's going anywhere. By the time the reports come in this evening, we start to get numbers, which of course we won't get any of until after the polls close. So, go have an adult beverage or do whatever it is that you need to do on Saturday because after you vote, if you're on the Democrat side, no point in, of course, if you're a Republican. But if you are a Democrat and you vote today, then get ready to drown your sorrows because I suspect that what's going to happen is that Biden is either going to be very, very close or he's going to actually lose. And in either case, it's a loss. Okay. He needs a runaway win here. Now, if he gets one, he gets one. Then he lives for another day, or at least until Super Tuesday, when I think he's going to get his teeth kicked in. The Democrat Party made a critical error in trying, and I don't know that the National Party did this so much. I think this was more the state parties trying to juggle their relevance because you had states that felt that if they did not have their primary on a certain point, if they did not get to the front of the line, so to speak, that by the time that their residents actually went and voted, the contest didn't matter. Okay, it's kind of like, if California was an East Coast state, for example, and so what was left by the time that you got to 7 or 8 o'clock Eastern time in the United States, a presidential election year, there were enough EVs that were decided that what everybody else didn't matter. All right. So once you got to the poll closing time on the East Coast, and some projections could be made about how that was going to, how that race was going to come out, then you may as well not go vote if you hadn't voted yet somewhere else, because the decision had already been made. From a mathematical perspective, it made absolutely no difference. Now, as it turns out, it's the other way around, but that's only because California happens to be on the West Coast, and California has a large population, therefore has a lot of EVs, and therefore as long as but in some ways not, because California has gone so far to the left over the years that the idea that California is going to be won by Trump, for example, or any Republican candidate ever on a national scale when the entire vote goes to one candidate for state is laughable. Okay, when was the last time California had a Republican senator, for example? I mean, let's look at that. By the way, if you want the answer to that question, it was Pete Wilson. He was last elected in 1988, and U.S. Senate was 1983 and 1999. And he's the last Republican senator that has ever been there on a full state basis. Now, of course, California has Republicans in their Senate at the state level, but U.S. Senate, Pete Wilson. Okay, so by 1990, You basically had the state was blue, and it has never changed from that. That's now 30 years. The idea that that's going to change as long as we have all the third world immigrants coming in is laughable. It's not. And that kind of thing is just flat out crazy. But this is just how it works. Okay, I mean, the Republican Party is what it is. We have all these people. We want to be competitive. We're the party against the illegal immigration, except when they're strawberry pickers. Except when Nancy Pelosi can, her family, people who own vineyards, can of course have them to pick their grapes. Except when it suits them. Which means when there's cheap labor in the Farm Belt, right? I mean, that's, yeah. And oh, by the way, if you think that they don't like it pretty much everywhere else in the country, because, the Republican Party is typically thought of as a party of business, law breaking is part and parcel of the Republican Party. It is for the Democrats, too, but for different reasons. All right, so, I mean, anyway, back to the primary. When you get that result tonight, you're going to know whether or not Joe Biden has a viable candidacy going forward. Because and again, what I've brought up with the Democrat Party repeatedly, and is a key point, is that the Democrats have to carry a very large percentage of the black population. And by the way, can I ask a question? If you are such a racist, you're a terrible racist, if you bring up anything that says that whites are superior this or whites are superior, why aren't you a racist when you say that if you're black, well, by God, you got to be a Democrat. You got to be a Democrat. Democrats are the ones that fomented and promoted and maintained slavery. Yeah. They're also the party that is a party of Mr. KKK Bird. A real no bullshit Ku Klux Klan member at a very high level within the organization, and a very long-serving U.S. senator who was never deposed from his seat. How a black person can vote for a man who was literally in the Klan. All right, when that, people say that that Trump is a Klansman. It's of course that's bullshit. But that's the argument they try to raise, is that Trump is a racist asshole and da da da. No, folks. We actually we no bullshit had a bunch of black people and the Democrat Party generally voting for and supporting a real no bullshit admitted Klansman. Nobody wants to talk about this in the context of elections. Nobody wants to talk about this in the context of race. Nobody wants to have that conversation, because if you actually have that conversation, then you have to deal with the reality of what's actually going on in the United States when it comes to these issues. And no one wants to go there. But I think it's funnier than hell. Whenever somebody starts to bring this stuff up, that's one of the first things I put on the table. I just got to toss it out there. It's kind of like taking a hand grenade, pulling the pin out, and throwing it out the coffee table and walking out of the room. Just to have the same kind of effect. All right. We'll see where we are. If you want my nickel prediction for tonight, and we'll see. Tomorrow I'll give you a podcast, tell you whether or not I was right. I'll either be gloating or I was wrong. I think Biden's going to get his teeth kicked in today. I think if he wins at all in South Carolina, it's going to be a very narrow victory. But it's very important for his candidacy to continue that he have a decisive victory, not a couple of points. Now, if he wins by 10 points, then okay, there we are. Okay, and I'm not at all convinced it's going to happen. In fact, I don't think it is at all. My guess is that that's just a load of BS. I really do. I think that's just flat out nonsense. Not going to happen. But we shall see. We shall see. All right, let's talk coronavirus. We have serious problems, folks, with this in regard to this. Realize that Japan has shut all of their schools down. Okay, now they did this due to a relatively small number of cases, but they're very concerned about the potential impact if this thing keeps going on, that it could hose the Olympics, which are coming up this year. That would be very bad for them economically. I mean, they built all these facilities. Oops. They expect all these tourists. Oops. So anyway, think about this this garbage. And oh, by the way, now we've got the latest crazies on the left. Bill Kristol, for one, but not just Bill Kristol, that says that President Trump has called concerns about the spread of coronavirus a hoax. No, that's just total bullshit. That's not what he said. He said he has said that the hoaxer, the people on the left are saying that he doesn't care, and that is a hoax. Well, that's the truth. Okay? The fact of the matter is that Trump slammed the door closed on Chinese nationals coming to the United States in January, which, by the way, he should have done earlier, and it shouldn't have just been China. Of course, so much of this is politically calculated as opposed to being epidemiologically calculated. And the other thing I think is amusing is how many leftists who run around with their hair on fire telling us, oh my gosh, we are so virtuous. We are, some of them that are market crooners and are very much involved in the stock market. Some are bulls, some are bears. Some are really don't care which way the line is sloping as long as it is. Of course, that's called a guy who does actual technical analysis and looks at things, and tries to figure out which way the market's going to go. Doesn't care which way it's moving as long as it is. And that's fine too. It's basically people, trading trends. So many of them have all said, "Oh my God, this is going to be, terrible in some places, but not here. But not here. I'm a virtue signaler. I drive a Tesla. I have $100,000 to throw away on a car. I never actually want to go more than 300 or 400 miles a time. Probably because I am of size and can't actually sit in a vehicle for more than 3 or 4 hours at a time without having my body complain loudly. And by God, but hey, I used to say, I go to the store with it. I go, I go to the bar, get drunk, my fun with my friends or whatever. And it's fantastic. I'm perfectly okay with all of the 6-year-old kids that are mining the cobalt that goes into the batteries, which has to be there in order for me to have this Tesla in my garage. So it's okay that the so-called Democratic Republic of the Congo, in other words, slave turd labor nation, that exploitation is perfectly fine as long as I can virtue signal with a car that has a T on the hood. The screaming hypocrisy and outrageous nonsense that comes out of these people is nauseating, and it has been for a long time. But the comeuppance is coming, folks. Because these very same people that live out there in the wonderful state of California are about to get it in the ass. There are now 2 apparently community transmitted cases in California. There's going to be a lot more. Do you know why? There's also cases now in Mexico. And if you want to follow the epidemiological evidence and the correct thing to do, or you want to slow this thing down before it gets into places like the homeless encampments in California, which, if that happens, is going to be a disaster. And by the way, it probably will. Okay? What you have to do is you have to slam the southern border shut. No people come across. Period. End of discussion. That's it. Because, again, remember, you can be asymptomatic and shedding this thing, especially in shit. So, if you are from a nation that does not play white man sanitation good, in other words, you cannot be trusted as an individual that when you go in to use the restroom, you are going to sit on a porcelain throne. you are going to wipe your butt when you are done with toilet paper. The toilet paper is not going to go on the floor, is not going to go in a trash can, is going to go in the can. And then the can is going to get flushed. And that piping is connected to either a sanitary septic system or a sanitary sewer where the virus will be destroyed. In other words, even if you blow up the bathroom and you expel some amount of virus into the air, it's a fraction of 1% of that which gets expelled into the air if you use a squat toilet, or if you crap on the floor, or if you crap on the ground, or if you wipe with your hands, or if you wipe with toilet paper and throw it on the ground or in a trash can or whatever. The point is, white man sanitation good puts most of the viral load that comes out of your butt into a place where it can't hurt anybody. And that, by the way, is why in these nations we don't have things like cholera. White men, I remind you, essentially slayed all of these diseases. They said disease still exists. But the reason we don't have widespread community transmission and outbreaks and epidemics and all this, of all of these diseases, all of them, is because white men invented the crapper and insisted on a working sanitary system. And, oh, by the way, we became inculcated to it. All right? And the last is very important because you can't solve this problem with money. You can put out, all you got to do is go look at what happened in India, okay? Where they crap on the road, they crap on the beach. They don't care. Open defecation is common. And you know what? The government of India, recognizing white man sanitation good, started building actual toilets, public toilets. Nobody uses them. Excuse me? Well, nobody uses them because culturally, that's not how you go to the bathroom. Problem with cultural issues like this is you can't fix them with money. You can only fix them with time and by changing culture. You need a generation of young people who grow up where from the first time that they're toddlers, when they start to transition from pooping and peeing in a diaper, or in some cases just all over the floor because they don't have diapers, or maybe you got just a piece of cloth so that it gets sort of contained when you're a baby, right? When you transition from that to actually having control of your bowels and your urine, and you put it where you want it to go is a flush toilet that's connected to a sanitary system. Okay? That's what you need to have happen. And those nations and those people are not going to change that in an afternoon. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at the problem. It makes no difference. Unfortunately, we have the entire Mexican nation on our southern border, which is only spottily concerned with white man sanitation good. Mexico is a mixed bag. There are parts of it where, indeed, white man sanitation good. Maybe that had something to do with the Spaniards conquering. Anyway, I know. We can get into that too, but let's not. Problem is, an awful lot of it, that is not the case. And so you have all these people, and by the way, these are the people that the Republicans love to have in our country because they pick strawberries and they work cornfields. And think about that one, folks. Your food. Oh, well, the good news is that most viruses don't last all that long. And by the time that gets harvested with anything that's in there that's in that realm is dead by the time it gets to your table, which is a good thing. Not to say that there aren't outbreaks sometimes, especially when it comes to things that could be in vegetables that don't get cooked correctly or you eat them raw, whatever have you. So there is some risk there. However, for the most part, it's bacterial. The viral thing tends not to be as big of a factor. The nonetheless, that risk does exist. Okay, it does, absolutely does exist. So, let's again, folks, California, all these, some of these other states, this is now a real thing, and tell me, when are we going to slam shut the Mexican border? We slam shut the Chinese people coming into this country. Why? Duh. What good did it do us? Supposedly in California, there's 8,000 people under medical surveillance. Why are there 8,000 people under medical surveillance? Because most of them had been to China. Oh, gee. Okay, so you didn't let the Chinese nationals in, but all the Americans that came in, did they go into quarantine? No, they're under medical surveillance. Wait a minute. The ones that came back after that had to do 14 days. How about everybody else? Yeah, not so much, right? How about all the community? Not so much. Well, now we have a couple of cases in California itself, okay, that we cannot trace to travel internationally. This means it's out. Further, we have the nation on our southern border that says that they have 2 cases, one up fairly close, another one in Mexico City, which is not all that close to the border with the U.S., but another one in Sonora, which is, hello, and that's just the ones that are being reported. Remember that large parts of Mexico, folks, are poor, and they have crappy medical surveillance, if any medical surveillance. So think about it, ladies and germs, because it's going to be germs. Is Trump going to slam that border closed? Oh, you know damn well he's not. Should he? Yeah, because there's how many people that go daily between the United States and Mexico? Daily cross that border on foot and in vehicles. Not just goods, people cross the border, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's the legal ones. Are we going to, nope, you got to close it. And then you're going to, for the illegal ones, you're going to have to post some military on the border. And you know what you're going to have to tell them to do if people insist on coming across anyway. But they're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. Mr. Strong American Border doesn't really mean it. Because if he did mean it, he'd be doing that. But here's the other thing that goes along with this, which is that means that the outbreaks in small areas in the United States, they're going to happen. All right? They're going to happen. They're going to happen because our president, and in fact, the Democrats as well, do not support doing what needs to be done in order to prevent it. Now, can we completely prevent it at this point? No. But can we slow it down dramatically? Yes, we could, at the cost of very significant economic dislocation. The problem with that for any politician is if you do it and you're successful and there is no economic dislocation, then you lose your job. Now, if you don't do it, then there's a huge problem and people die. Now, context is important. The context is that for most reasonably healthy, younger people, those who are not immune compromised, those who are not elderly, if you get this thing, the odds of it hosing you are very low. Not zero, but very low. Well less than 1%. All right? Folks, you take these kinds of odds all the time, okay? And nobody wants to talk about it, but it's the truth. You take these kinds of odds all the time. We are very bad. Humans, generally, as a species, are very bad at quantifying risks that are relatively low probability but are catastrophic if they happen. We suck at doing it. All right? Mentally, we have a very large problem with that. As I pointed out, it is at least reasonably probable that I've had this virus. I just wasn't sick enough to seek medical attention. Therefore, I was never tested. Now, if they had an antibody test, which my understanding is they don't, that what they have at this point is they actually look for the direct viral RNA. If they had an antibody test, I could find out. And if it was cheap enough and confidential, in other words, nobody had the results but me, I'd probably go get one if I could buy one for $5 or $10 and stick my finger at the house and see if there's antibodies. I might go do that just for my own personal information, because it would inform me greatly as to whether or not I have a lesser or greater risk of becoming infected if I'm exposed to it again. All right? I mean, look, having antibodies doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely immune, because there can be serotype differences between the virus. But not having them means that you aren't at all. Okay, so, being able to quantify that is actually kind of useful piece of information. But there isn't any way for you to do that. When we get to the point that you start to see these brush fire kind of outbreaks, you're going to see schools shut down. You're going to see enormous economic dislocations. The insanity on both the left and right of allowing supply chains, especially for medical supplies, to all run through third world nations like China is crazy. I have been saying this for a decade and more, especially when you're talking about things that are of critical supply, i.e. pharmaceuticals, electronics. Just try to buy some of the more important things that go into electronics that don't get sourced out of China or with materials out of China. That didn't used to be the case. Now it is. This sort of stuff, folks, is nuts. It's flat out nuts. But it's the world we live in. It's not time to slam the door closed and bolt it. But the idea that economic dislocation is not going to continue for a fairly decent period of time, oh, yes, it is. And oh, by the way, is that going to have an impact on the stock market? Yes, and it should, because this bubblicious bullshit that's been going on for the last 10 effing years is a bunch of crap. And it's driven by offshoring labor to third world nations because you can get essentially slavery. Now think about this, folks. Think about this. We're not talking about just economic slavery like you have in China with a communist party, right? They tear up your farming village and put a factory there. You telling me that you actually have choice? You don't have freedom of movement, freedom of location, freedom to choose where to live in China. It's a communist country. You're no more free to say F you and leave than you were in East Germany before the wall came down. No. We're going even further than that. All these damn virtue signaling monsters like real slavery, exploit real slavery, because you need things like cobalt. And the largest single source of cobalt in the world today, the largest source of supply, is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where they really, no bullshit, for real, essentially enslave children to mine the ore that gets refined and the cobalt extracted from it. You are, if you are driving an EV, if you are a solar power maniac, battery storage and all this bullshit, folks, that's what you're doing. You are forcing the employment of slaves. Why? Because every one of the companies involved, that's where the supply is coming from. And you know what? We're not willing to say, nope, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to bring that manufacturing back in the United States. Oh, we're going to actually have to pay people real money. We're going to actually have to pay the costs associated with that. It's the same bullshit that goes on with all these crazies talking about, oh, we got to tear down these dams out in California and up in the rest of the Pacific Northwest because the salmon, especially up in the Pacific Northwest, we got to take these dams out of service. It's a gigawatt of hydro supply that comes off. What are you going to replace it with? Hey, listen, I get it. I like fish too. Okay? But you go ahead and you tear it down. Now, that decision, by the way, has been put on hold. The greenies and the leftists are screaming. Well, you know what? They say, well, we'll have wind and we'll have solar. Oh, okay, so you'll have human slaves in preference to a fish. Pardon me. Here's your weapon. Use it on yourself. That sort of insanity really ought to be the kind of thing that gets you locked out of the next cocktail party. And you want to call somebody a racist? Now there's a reason to call someone a racist. You are a racist if you support slavery. Anyway, listen, guys, the coronavirus thing, the transmission let's face facts. In the United States, you're going to get spots of outbreak where white man sanitation good doesn't really apply. But for the most part, the transmission rate within America where white man sanitation good does apply, and if you're a white person, you ought to take credit for it. And all those people are screaming about racism and reparations, everything. Tell them that as soon as they are willing to give up having flush toilets and sanitary sewers, that you'll be more than happy to talk to them about it. Until then, they owe you, because they're not going to die from this virus if their grandmother is 80. Yeah, because that's reality, folks. Nonetheless, again, it is not time to slam the door. But if you think the dislocation is not coming and the fear-mongering is not coming, well, guess what? The fear-mongering is already happening. The Democrats are already trying to claim that Trump doesn't care about any of this stuff. I mean, that's their latest line of bullshit. And, here we go. All right, they couldn't get it with Russia. They tried that. That went nowhere. They spent millions of dollars on it. Now they're trying to scaremonger with this. That Trump doesn't care about people. He doesn't give a crap, and that's why he's got Pence. And oh, by the way, if you haven't seen the things about, Pence doesn't believe in science. Oh, really? He doesn't? Last time I checked, Mike Pence believes in the science that when you come out of a vagina, that is, you're born, you are a male or a female. You have one set of genitalia, you have another. You have one set of chromosomes, you have another. I think that's called science. I know. There's 27,000 different genders. Well, guess what? No, there's not. There's two sexes. And incidentally, if you have ever met a child that has not at some point said, "Mommy, I'm a horse," or I'm Superman, or whatever, you've never been around children, or you never were one yourself, or you just don't remember what you used to do when you were one. That's called fantasy. And fantasy's perfectly fine as long as you can separate it from reality. You know what the difference is between adults and children, especially young toddlers? Okay? One of the things about becoming adult is that you are supposed to develop enough discernment to be able to figure out what is fantasy, and if you choose to enjoy it, that's fine. But you recognize that it is a fantasy. It is not real. Same thing's true here with this virus. Same thing's true with economics. The same thing's true with energy. The fact that there is a unit of energy behind every unit of output, every unit of productivity in the world. And if you want to tear dams down, do things like that, hey, listen, fine. But then when you go up to the wall and you flip the switch, the light's not going to come on. And if you back it up with fossil fuel generators, so it will, you got to put that into the cost model. And if you don't like the number that comes out of the other end of that, then that's not what you do. And for those of you that think that you are virtue signaling by having an electric car, listen, you're doing the same damn thing as not admitting what's going on. Why do we have a viral outbreak in China? Why are we getting it in other places? Why is it happening in Iran, for crying out loud? Guam. I think that's pronounced correctly. Their little holy shrine that they will not shut down. And how much white man sanitation good do you have in Iran? Yeah. And oh, by the way, you want to talk about not being scientific? There are statements out there that the Iranians actually believe that the shrine is a place of healing. It will keep you from getting sick. Well, how'd that work out for the Iranian leadership? Several of them seem to have the virus. Maybe it'll get all the mullahs. Most of them are old. That'd be a shame, wouldn't it? Anyway, that's it for today, folks. Let's see what happens with the primary today, South Carolina, and the results. I'm your ticker guy. Have a good one.